Welcome to the PowerPoint overview of the Harlequin, a pretty royal breed. And this emphasis of this talk is kind of more about the nationals quality rabbits, the rabbits that the nationals judges are seeing and the things that we're really looking for to put those top rabbits forward for the ultimate best in show. So gracing our front screen, obviously, the first slide is the very recognizable 2019 convention winner. Just a handsome animal. Even from a distance, the clarity and the alternations are so clear. It's just absolutely easily identifiable. And I think that's just a great way to kind of frame our mind as we start talking about the difference it makes at the national level and those animals that really deserve that win and just edge out the competition. So this year, as you know, the exhibition show that we had for Harlequin was by video only. And I think this is one of the breeds that can be judged by video mostly fairly, but it was difficult to really evaluate quality of fur and condition of flesh. Both of those things really enhanced the rabbit. They really can make a standout representative. So really, as a nationals judge, that is the #1 feature that I'm looking for. And I think that's probably should be very similar and very straightforward across the nation, is that the correct markings are paramount. This is a marked breed. It is considered a commercial rabbit, but it's not. It has its own unique type. And it is very, very distinctly unique in almost every way. And this little breed is just fantastic. And the correctly marked exhibits, they demand attention. They are so fantastically difficult to raise and to get. So when you see one that has clarity and depth of color and correct alternations, it is something of just magnificence. I understand the royal references here because they truly are a royal breed. For me, as I look at these rabbits, the first thing kind of goes through my head is I consider them a math breed. So as I pull out Harlequin and I'm looking at my first few exhibits, I'm already in my head assessing where those 60 points are going to fall. I'm looking for those animals that are going to mark the highest in the most important category. And the standard of the Harlequin is one of the only standards that breaks down point values this detailed. It literally wants 5 points allotted to each ear, 5 points allotted to each side of the head, 5 points allotted to each leg marking, 20 points body and chest together. It's so specific that as a nationals judge, I had to take my standard and make a little diagram so that I know the animal that I'm putting forward is going to be the animal that's going to merit the majority of these points and is going to win the breed based on the highest point schedule according to your SOP. And it's very specific. So this is one of the diagrams that I used as I do my initial assessment of that animal. I am only looking at markings. That's it. I mean, I will pose the animal. That's interesting. That's good information. But that is not why we're here for this breed. And I know that there's been some discussion in the past. There's a few articles on the National Club about frustration with judges overemphasizing type. And I've read those. And I read those last year. I joined a lot of national clubs. And I made a very strong emphasis to not do that, to award and to follow with a strict interpretation of your standard. And if you do that, I believe the right rabbit is going to rise to the top every time. Now, that said, there are some distinctions that I'd like to point out as I study this breed, and I've engaged in quite a few clinics, lots and lots of breeders' conversations. I am on the Facebook standards revision discussion committee, I guess for lack of a better term, as a non-breeder judge, just for my feedback and input, and I've really gleaned some awesome information. So from a nationals level, certainly you want a 100-point animal. Okay, I don't know that exists in any breed. However, you want the animal that's going to have the highest number of points in the most important categories. So with that said, I've kind of listed markings here 3 times because that's how much emphasis this breed demands. And second to that, I've kind of grouped fur quality and clarity together because like other breeds, it's really difficult to have one without the other. And I have some some photos that I've put together to kind of illustrate that. And the final point that I'd like to make is we talk about the Harlequin being a math breed, because that's how the National Club has written their standard, is the definition of body and chest. This can differ somewhat from judge to judge. It's very clear what we mean by chest. The standard is really clear about the ideal Harlequin needs to have a chest evenly divided, so as close as possible down the middle, with depth and continuation of color all the way through that front leg. Okay, that's undisputed, and it needs to alternate with the face. We get that part. But what doesn't really get detailed is how many points for the body and how many points are applied to that chest. For me, as I look at these exhibits, the chest is important, but the body is also pretty critical, because in order to have those 5 to 7 alternations, that body needs to really balance with that 3-part frontal. And so one of the things I'm looking for as I judge these rabbits is not just the highest point value, but I'm looking for the rabbit that has the best balance of the most distinguishable features. And that body is pretty important. That is easily half of those points in my mind, if not more, depending on how the other markings are, how harmonious they are, essentially. So that's my my kind of national judge perspective as I think about this breed. It's a very specific breed. It's not a breed that you can pull out, look at type, put it back, grab the next rabbit. These rabbits demand a little bit of intellectual review. This is a breed that takes longer to judge. To do it well, you even need to let them move on the table a little bit to identify how the balance of pattern moves from left to right along that rabbit. And so these are the things in my mind as I'm looking for the best of the best. And I always want the breeds that I put forward, and I think this is true for any judge. We want our breed that we put up as best of breed at a national level, especially if it's a convention, to go on and win best in show. Definitely a group, definitely best in show. So we're selecting just extremely carefully and applying this to the best of our ability. So as we talk about the most important factor in this breed, markings, this is a class that I judged recently, obviously in person. Well, not that recent. This was pre-COVID, but I found some really beautifully marked animals. And I was really excited that I saw not only balance, but clarity, depth of color, and correct length of fur. And we'll talk about fur toward the end. But the nationals level rabbits, they really are, the clean lines, they're expected. This is a level of competition that we really expect to see clean division. We want to see those edges that are crisp, flyback commercial fur that really enhances those clean lines, and 5 to 7 alternations on both sides for that balance. And as I go into Harlequins, and I did my virtual judging just recently, that's the first thing that it's in my mind, is this is a national contest. Let's find that animal that's going to have not only the balance, but I want to see those clean lines, those markings that are set apart by very little intermixing of colors. Now, the 3 frontal markings, similar to other breeds, that's one of the things that this breed is, everyone strives to produce that 3-part frontal. The last several shows I've judged, I haven't put up the 3-part frontal. And there's a very good reason for that. If the color and the quality of the body markings are not there, and that 3-part frontal is not consistent and clean enough to merit full points, there's no way it's going to approach that full 60-point ranking. It can't. So that 3-part is ideal, but it cannot be placed above the balance of the other factors, which are clean lines, 5 to 7 alternations, balance side to side, and I want to see depth of color with correct length of fur. So all these things are part of markings. Even though fur has its own category, if your fur is off, it greatly affects your edges. It greatly affects those clean lines. They don't look crisp. They overlay each other, and you start to wonder if it's intermixing or if it's just the edges blurring of one colored section into another, or into a white section. So for this particular discussion, the 3-part that lacks clarity or balance it's not a shoo-in. This is not a breed that the standard allots all the points on whether those ears, face, and chest are present or not. This is a breed that demands math. You have to start balancing. How are those legs? How many points on clarity? 15 points. And so that's where all those other point values can actually edge out the other rabbit for that win. So these are really good examples here of rabbits that show very good division between the markings, although they're not perfectly centered. So the face, the parting line down the center of the face, not perfectly centered on the mag or the Japanese. However, the clarity, the distinction, really, really good body markings as well. I don't have any close-up photos. I took these, not necessarily intending to use them in the PowerPoint, but more for just one of the references that I include in my materials as a judge. The color and clarity go hand in hand. So as we're looking at these, the color and trying to evaluate whether or not the brindling, how many points to take off for that. And at the nationals level, these animals need to have vibrant color, depth of color, and they have to have quality of color to allow the clarity through that marking. And I consider both of these simultaneously as I'm judging and evaluating this class, and I'm applying those points. As I'm looking for that dense, rich color and a no mixing of colors. I'm looking for distinct. The ideal markings just pop. You take out a rabbit and you start looking through the head, the face, the chest, the body, and in your mind you're assigning and you're evaluating those points, and do those legs alternate. And as you evaluate that, the colors that intermix and that don't have good clarity, it can be very difficult to even know how many alternations are on a side, because if they start to intermix, then you're almost guessing, would that be a true bar? Because to me, it looks like heavy brindling, not very good clarity down that body. Definitely not going to score as high as a rabbit that maybe had fewer alternations, but those alternations were crisp and distinct and bright and bold, and they had really good dense color. That makes a big difference over lines, bars, and bands that you can sort of see, but you've got to really squint and kind of turn your head sideways. That's kind of a joke within the breed. Some of the nationals breeders have said, the alternations are there, but only if you look a certain direction and you have a distance from the rabbit. And to me, that's not going to merit these 15 points. And when you get up there and the competition is that distinct and that competitive, it makes a huge difference when you get down to clarity and the color. Now, the fur that I touched on earlier is the rabbit in the middle is a good example. When the fur gets long, there's a couple of problems with that. One is it truly commercial flyback, because the length and the density of fur greatly affects the rate of return. And in addition to that, which could also bring up some questions for correct fur type, and a judge would be within their realm of assessment to determine if that is not a flyback commercial coat, it could be DQ'd. So the other problem is, as you look at that middle rabbit, look what happens to the edges. Look what happens to the clarity of the markings, the clarity of those bands, those bars, the hair, the long coat just starts to overlap each level in front of it. And it starts to kind of just look like this blurry, almost transitional fade of color. And that is the antithesis of clarity. And I put the 2019 variety winner, which I'm announcing this. I don't think it's been announced yet. So here's kind of a spoiler alert. But anyway, here we go. This is a very, very nice rabbit. This is my youth rabbit. I selected this animal. Brilliant, vibrant, depth of color. This was a virtual show, so the photo quality is not as good because it's not in person. However, take a look at this animal and look at the difference. When you're looking at a nationals level animal, she just pops out at you. Not only does she have a beautiful chest parting, and it's not particularly perfectly center, but minor point deduction for the depth and the crisp edging of that color, the correct length of coat. She's got a very, very good vibrancy of color, very clean left parting line of that face. And her body markings were also distinct, vibrant, extreme clarity. Even though she does not have a full 3-part frontal, you can clearly see those ears don't alternate with the face. but the quality, the clarity, the depth of color, the balance side to side is what makes the difference. And this animal, and by the way, I love that pose because it allows me to see the entire front part of this animal and a good portion of that left side without having to have so many multiple views. So when I let the Harlequins, and a lot of nationals judges, they do this. They did this at convention last year. We let them move on the table, and we're looking for your animal to just kind of show off the balance of that pattern. Often they will stop and they'll stand like this doe off the table, showing that full chest, and it is absolutely striking. Now, if this rabbit had fur like my middle rabbit, it would greatly impact the clarity, the clean edge of her markings. It would not be as dramatic, it would not be as correct, and she'd lose some points. Depending on how long her fur was, we might run into a problem if it was really flyback, if it was really commercial. Now, the rabbit over here on the far left, that was a picture I took up in Idaho. Another rabbit with really good fur, and I tried to capture that. I know that the rabbit's in a very unusual pose, but I was trying to show as much of the surface area of that fur and how glossy, how dense and uniform with just crisp return. Really, really nice furred animal. And when you put your hands on that, it leaves an impression, and it can show off a pattern. The pattern's not particularly clear and not as much depth of color. She's got quite a bit intermixing and quite a bit of brindling. But when you take fur that is short and glossy and prime, and you put markings like this 2019 winner here, you have a rabbit that just demands attention. It is fantastically beautiful, and fur cannot be overlooked when you're judging markings because it goes hand in hand. It directly affects the depth of color that you see because of all that bleeding into the next color with that extra length of fur. It directly affects the clarity of the edges, and it distinctly makes an impression in your mind of this crisp, clean, patterned animal. And it is something that I think, as I judge these breeds quite a bit lately, there's a wide variation in fur, and I feel like this is one of the areas that needs to really be given a lot of attention because it directly impacts how much clarity, how many clarity points the judges are applying, and it really makes a difference on how these animals appear and how well their markings are demonstrated. Type is my last slide. So this is a fairly quick and to the point presentation. It's last because it's 10 points. Even a rabbit with an F type, so let's say you take off and you give the rabbit a 50% grade. A 50% grade is a failing type. That's 5 points. So with that said, it is not the main emphasis. And when I judge nationals, when I judge any show actually, when I judge this breed, I comment on type last. It comes into consideration in the placings only when the marked animals are similar. So it's never a factor when I'm looking at the best representative. It's part of the combination of factors. So a well-typed animal is definitely a beautiful specimen. The well-proportioned Harlequin with that smooth top line and that rounded body profile certainly stands out. It creates a harmonious balance. And although the standard, it does not mention length of body, they are part of the commercial body type group. So we know that they are a medium body length, and that we want that high point, we want that top line to start at the base of the ear. So even with the animal on the left, your convention open best of breed, even with a late start and a long shoulder, it's not going to be a significant point deduction overall in the total valuation of this animal. This animal is well fleshed and has a very nicely rounded hindquarter, and you can see how the markings just kind of turn with that pelt, and it's really, really beautiful. Same with the animal on the right, poorly marked. It's got, you know, fairly faded markings, doesn't have that good depth of color, quite a bit of intermixing in that base coat color and the markings. But what this animal does have is, you know, pretty correct top line. Starts at the base of the ear, a little bit weak in the shoulder, but still rises up to a point a little bit ahead of the center of the hip, but does kind of show that profile. That's that commercial type profile. And they are very unique because although a commercial breed, they're not necessarily anywhere near the same body type as our other more well-known commercial breeds. And so we can't really use that as a comparison. We have to appreciate the language and the uniqueness of how this breed is described. And I think to be competitive though, for an all breed best in show, type accentuates your markings and your fur and your breed attributes. And it can definitely make a difference, because at the final stage, beautiful fur, very good alternation of balance, and good edge and clarity of markings is going to be even more noticeable when that rabbit is well fleshed with a beautiful typey depth of body and rounding smoothly over that hind quarter. It really stands out. And with that flyback fur, with that luster and gloss and prime condition, I think that can definitely be the edge for the all breed wins. And you would see the Harlequin a lot more often in those top placings if both of those factors were combined. So the fur and the type, the smaller point categories were also kind of grouped with some of those clarity points, the better balance of alternation, and the more dramatic depth of color to have that balance. So for me, for this breed, it is a wonderfully fun breed to judge. I greatly enjoy them. It takes a while as I evaluate points and I try to assign those. And I think judges sometimes shy away from them because the standard is so specific. And when you break it out, you realize that it is truly a balance. And the markings are always going to take precedent over and should be the mark of the winning rabbit. And hopefully that same rabbit that has the best, highest point value on markings also is going to have tremendous fur, commercial type, and prime glossy condition. So thank you all. And that's all I have for today. And hopefully the virtual show will be announced soon.